Hello and good day. So our topic for today is translation. You must be familiar with the term translation. Translation is rendering of a text, that is converting a text from one language into another language. We will be looking at a few definitions of translation. So let's define what is translation first. Translation, that is, it is rendering meaning from one language into another language. Translation refers to the written language. Interpretation refers to the spoken language. And the main purpose of translation is to convey the original intent of the message, taking into account the cultural and the regional differences between languages. Another definition of translation is that it is a mental activity in which meaning of the given linguistic discourse rendered from source language to target language. That is, the language which is translated is the source language, and the language we arrive at is the target language. So this is a transaction that takes place between the source language and the target language. This is translation. Of course, a translator needs to be faithful in doing his duty. He needs to convey the exact and the original intent of the source language text. Another definition is translation is generally used to refer to all process and methods used to convey the meaning of the source language into target language. So what is common is to all these definitions is that is there is a text which needs to be converted from one language into another language. So we have the source language and the target language. So one more definition which is slightly more technical, that is, translation is studying the lexicon, which is the vocabulary, words, lexicon, the grammatical structure, the communicative situation, and the cultural context, and analyzing it in order to determine its meaning, then reconstructing that meaning using the lexicon and the grammatical structure appropriate in the target language and its cultural context. So this is what is translation. These are the various definitions of translations. Now, translation, we have been talking about translation. We have also talked about source language and target language. So let's make it clear that the source language that we are talking about here is Hindi, and the target language we are talking about is English. And there are a lot of differences between the source language and target language, and a translator faces a lot of difficulties translating from source language to target language. People have been translating from Hindi to English right from years, since years and years. They have been translating from Hindi to English, and they have been facing difficulties because no two languages have one-to-one correspondence, and cultures are different. So what the terms that are there in one culture may not be there in another culture. So you need to present the culture of source language into target language. So you need to find the equivalence, which can be a tough job. So it is better to know the differences and the similarities of source language and target language. So we'll be looking at the differences and similarities. So here, as you can see in this picture, there is a stress shift in English, that is our target language. That is, the stress in nouns is on the first syllable, and stress in verbs is on the second syllable, and so also there is a difference in their pronunciation. The first word here in this picture is present. Present, that is the noun, and present is the word. Conflict is the verb, and conflict is the noun. Contest is the verb, and contest is the noun. So the stress shifts, and also there is a difference in pronunciation. But this is not the case in Hindi. In Hindi, a word, no matter under what circumstances, it's pronounced the same way. The pronunciation is the same. Another difference is in the syntax, that is the structure of Hindi and English. In English, we have the structure subject, verb, object. Whereas in Hindi we have subject, object, verb. As you can see an example in this picture, in English we have he sang a song. So he is the subject, sang is the verb, a song is the object. In Hindi we say usne gana gaya. So we have the object before the verb, and the structure goes subject, object, verb. So this is another difference, the syntactical difference between our source language and target language in Hindi and English. Then Hindi does not have definite articles, so also learners of English, they face difficulty in use of definite articles. Then Hindi assigns gender to inanimate objects. The form of verb changes the gender. In English, this is not there. For instance, we say that kursi wahan rakhi hai. So rakhi, the verb form changes for kursi. If we use the term pen, pen wahan rakha hai. So again, it changes for the form of verb changes for considering the gender. So this is there for inanimate objects, which is not there in English. And then a lot of words from English have been borrowed, have come into Hindi. For instance, words like car, bus, station, cycle, computer, etc. Now these words are used in everyday language, even by speakers of Hindi. So these are some of the differences. We'll be talking about more differences between the source language and target language later in the lecture. Now we've been talking about translation. Now, a thing comes to mind that strikes our mind that why this translation is so important. Why do we need to translate? There is a concept in the world that this world has become a global village. People have come closer to each other, and there is more interaction. There is more business among countries. So people of different areas, different regions, with speaking different languages, they need to interact with each other. So translation is required. Translation is important. Which brings people closer to each other. And also translation has been an important factor of grammar translation method, teaching method for teaching English to learners here in our country. This has proved to be very effective, and it is also better to know both the differences, similarities and differences of both the source language and the target language. In order to learn the target language, the second language, which is English, and first language is Hindi. The first language usually we acquire, and the second language we learn. So the Hindi is the acquisition of language is the language comes to us as we grow. We don't need to know the grammar and all these things of the source language, our mother tongue. But of course, the language that we learn, we need to learn the grammar and everything else of the language that we, of our target language, the second language. So what happens is there is the interference of a mother tongue interference while using the foreign language or the second language. We have internalized the rules and mechanisms and the workings of the source language inside us, and when we try to use English, that is the second language or the foreign language, we try to impose those rules and regulations onto English. So we need to be aware that we need to avoid this mother tongue interference. However, translation is important because of these reasons. Here, as you can see, importance of translation. Now, talking about the process of translation. Translation is a process that is a translator needs to know. It is essential for a translator to know, to have a knowledge of both the source language as well as target language. Not only that, he also needs to have knowledge of the source language text, which he wants to convert from one language into another language. An easy way out of this is the machine translation or the translation by computer. But computer or machine translations, it has its own limitations because it can translate only set phrases and expressions and cannot go beyond that. After that, the human translator, he has to rework on it and he has to edit it. What a machine translator or computer translator can do is to provide the first draft of the translation, and then the human translator has to do the rest. Human translator is essential in the process of machine translation also. And as I told you that he needs to have a knowledge, he needs to be familiar with the context, the culture of the two languages. So for him to be authentic in translating from one language to other. Now, having talked about the process of translation, we come to the methods of translation. That is, there can be mental translation as well as written physical translation. Mental translation is when a translator listens or hears that source language, and he analyzes in his mind, and he converts it, speaks it in the target language. And the physical translation is the written one. When he writes the translation, translates from source language to target language, it is the written mode. And then we have word-to-word translation. In this type of translation, a translator translates each and every word of the source language into the target language. The source language text that is given, he translates each and every word of that, and then he puts those words in order, leaving out the contextual meaning and the socio-cultural attributes. This translation also has limitation, although it has its uses in bilingual and multilingual situations. But the translation of meanings is out of context as far as idioms or proverbs or metaphors are concerned. So this type of translation is considered slightly inferior. As you can see in this picture in the activity section, now burn the midnight oil or cross the bridge when you come to it. So if we try to translate each and every word of it without catching the meaning, the translation would not be a good one. It won't be an authentic translation. So this is what happens. This is where the word translation has its limits. Now the other translation is the semantic translation, where the translator focuses on the meaning. Instead of translating each and every word, he tries to catch the meaning of what the writer of the source language text is trying to say, and then he tries to convey that meaning in the target language. So this is a translation is sense for sense relationship, sense for sense translation, and it is also known as free translation. And in this type of translation, we can translate even the proverbs and metaphors and idioms, etc. Now, talking about another translation is functional translation, which is translated in which a translator focuses on the function. That is, what function, what role, what is the requirement of the translation that he is doing, and for whom is he translating. A very good example is if a translator, that is in this type of translation, he tries to cast the thought of the writer of the source language text, and he tries to recreate that thought. The translator focuses on the function in terms of context of the source text as well as the situation. For example, if a translator tries to translate a brochure for a foreigner, he will include the language as well as the history and cultural items in it. But if he tries to translate the same brochure for a local person, he may ignore all these things, and the translation may be entirely different. So this type of translation, it depends on the function. What is the requirement of the translation? And finally, we come to transcreation. Now, this type of translation is known as creative translation. In this case of translation, the source language text, it is the process of developing and adapting a text from the source language, from one language into another language without any change in meaning, the intent, the style, context, tone, or the emotions of the source material. It is about taking a concept, and the translator tries to recreate that concept in the target language. And not only he has the authority to transform the content, the copyright, the image selection, the font, and other types of transformation. And now this technique is usually it is useful in the field of advertising and for marketing professionals. Now it is a complex activity, and a translator needs to be an expert, a linguist, a competent linguist who will take care of the context, the culture, the content expertise, and the writing skills. So all these things have to be taken into account, and then the translator tries to recreate and gives a new life to the material, to the source material. So this is about transcreation. Then there are some useful tips for translators, which translators must take into account while translating from source language to target language. Of course, reading the text is a must. They have to go through the text. The second one is, as you can see from this picture, split the long sentences into short sentences. Avoid only literal translation rather than translate words as well as emotions. Derive the meaning in the context of the source of the text. Prepare a rough draft, taking care of idioms and the structure of the vernacular. Make necessary changes in the rough draft. So all these things the translator has to take into account. The main thing is to catch the meaning. That is, main thing is he should be able to stick to what is being said in the original source language text, and he should try to recreate it in the target language. Then the translator, two more points that he has to follow is the translated piece should be legible, flawless, and without cutting. The translated piece should carry the stamp of original and convey the same meaning. This is what is common to all types of translation. We have seen various definitions in translations that we have seen in this, that we have studied, that we have seen in this lecture, and all of these definitions, they have one thing in common, that it should be original and the meaning should be the same. Translation should not be such that it changes the meaning. Now, having talked about the steps of translation, we talk about some more differences in our source language and the target language. Now, as you can see in this picture, we have a sentence that is Ram, that is in Hindi, Ram daud raha hai. So if we try to translate word by word, Ram running is, which is ungrammatical. So Ram is running. So what is the difference over here? As we said, that is, Hindi follows the subject object verb structure, and English follows the subject verb object structure. So here we have Ram is running. And also an interesting thing is that the helping verb, it is on the left side, while in Hindi it is on the right side. This is another difference between our source language and target language. And as I've already told you, that Hindi, the difference between our, that is, the verb is in the final position, and in English the verb comes in the middle position, the difference of SVO and SOV. Now again, we have one difference between, as you can see in this picture, the transitive verbs which have object, which a word object has to be there even if we answer the question. Example is, did you buy the car? Yes, I bought it. We have to use this word object it. But this is not the case in Hindi when the question is, kya aapne car kharidi hai? So it is just, हाँ मैंने खरीदी है. There is no mention of it. The overt object is not required in Hindi. Another difference between source language and target language. Then talking about the prepositions. In Hindi, normally in English, the preposition is on the left side of the noun, and in Hindi it is on the right side of the noun. As you can see this sentence over here, kitab mez par hai. So kitab mez par hai, mez is the noun and par is a preposition. And here the English version is, the book is on the table. So on is the preposition and on the table is the noun phrase. So we have on, the preposition before the noun, it precedes the noun, whereas in Hindi this preposition, it follows the noun precedes the preposition. This is the difference between, so instead of noun preposition plus noun, we have noun plus postposition because it comes after the noun. Then there is a difference between, in the case of genitive. In case of Hindi, our source language, the genitive is always towards the left of the governing noun. That is, if we say Delhi ka mayor. So ka mayor, the genitive is on the right side, and in the case of English, it is on the left side. The governing noun precedes the genitive, and in Hindi, the genitive precedes the governing noun, Delhi ka mayor. So Delhi ka is the genitive which precedes the governing noun mayor. In English, the mayor of Delhi, the governing noun mayor precedes the genitive of Delhi. But if we use the apostrophe S in genitive, we may get similar structures like Delhi's mayor and Delhi ka mayor. So we get similar structures, and also. The second case, as you can see from this picture, is about the indirect object which comes before the direct object. Ram Sita ko kitab dega. So indirect object is usually, almost in all cases, it is before the direct object. But in English, we can have indirect object before, as well as we can have after the direct object. Ram will give a book to Sita, or Ram will give Sita a book. We can have this way. We can have either ways, the indirect object before or indirect object indirect object before or after it with the help of a preposition. But in Hindi, it is indirect object is usually before the direct object. Then we have another case over here, that is difference. That is, as I told you, that if we have auxiliaries and if we have helping verbs along with the main verb, in English it is a rule that the main verb, the auxiliaries precede the main verb. But in Hindi, it is just the reverse. That is, the main verb comes first, and then which is followed by the rest of the verb phrase, like Sita roti kha rahi hogi. So Sita roti kha is the main verb over here, and rahi hogi is the rest of the verb phrase which follows the main verb. But in English, Sita might be eating bread. So eating is the main verb, and might be is the rest of the verb phrase which precedes the main verb. But in Hindi, the main verb comes first, and the rest of the verb phrase, it follows the main verb. So another difference between our source language and target language. One more difference is that of the comparison. As you can see from this picture, Sita Kamla se lambi hai. So the standard of comparison comes before the marker of the comparison. Standard is Kamla, because we are comparing Sita with Kamla. Kamla is our standard, and the marker is lambi hai. But the marker of comparison comes before the standard in English. Sita is taller than Kamla. So taller is our marker of comparison, and Kamla is the standard of comparison. So this is again the difference between our source language and target language. And again, the difference of adverbials. Normally in English, we have the manner of adverbial, then we have the place of adverbial, and finally we have the time adverbial in the end. But in Hindi, the time adverbial precedes the place adverbial. Ram Sita se kal cannot place mein milega. So Ram Sita with tomorrow cannot place. This is the word-to-word translation. We need to put it in order. So Ram will meet Sita in cannot place tomorrow. This is in English. This is the right version in English, in which the place adverbial precedes the time adverbial, whereas in Hindi, the time adverbial precedes the place adverbial. Another difference between source language and target language. Now, having talked about differences, there are also certain similarities between them. That is, the numerals and the adjectives, they always precede the noun, both in Hindi as well as in English. Now, a word about a relative clause. Now, in Hindi, a relative clause there are three possible ways. That is, it may immediately follow the noun, it may precede the noun, or it may be away from the noun. But in English, a relative clause normally follows the noun that it is modifying. So this is the difference between source language and target language. That is, that boy, वो लड़का फिल्मों में काम करता है जो गा रहा है. वो लड़का जो गा रहा है फिल्मों में काम करता है. But in English, that boy, the boy who is singing works in the film. This is the thing that is preferred. Hindi has three possible ways, but English has just one. The English prefers just the one way of relative clause. That is, the boy who is singing works in the films. Now, having talked about relative clauses, we talk about Now, another case is a boy came in who met with an accident. That is, uh, a boy who met with an accident came in. This is what should be there. The relative clause in 55 occurs to the right of the head noun, the boy. In English, sometimes the relative clause occurs to the right of the independent clause. A boy came in, because came in is shorter than we have a longer the relative clause who met with an accident. So we need to usually put the longer things at the end, the heavier things at the end. In Hindi, there are three possible ways of forming a relative clause. This we have already talked about. It is an interesting to note that verb final languages, the relative clause occurs usually to the left of the head noun, whereas in English, the relative clause occurs to the right of the head noun. So this is another difference. And then talking about weather conditions, we always use it in a target language in English, like as you can see in this example, in this picture. It is cold in December. It is too hot in the room. If we were to use Hindi version, we would just say that December में ठंड है, इस कमरे में बहुत गर्मी है. There is no room for it. As you can see at the bottom, it is raining. So we just use बारिश हो रही है in Hindi. There is no room for again it, which we only use in English. Also, there is a case of there, which is expletive when we talk about indefinite nouns or pronouns. For instance, example, there is a book on the table, or there is someone in the room. Now, the location of both someone and the book on the table is clear. So there is just use, the use of there is meaningless. However, English has rules that we need to use there in the place of the subject. But if we try to have a question form for this, where is someone in the room, which is absurd. Again, where is a book on the table, which is again absurd, because the location is already given on the table and in the room. So Hindi does not have this expletive there, which is meaningless. Of course, there, if it is meaningful, like the sentence 69 and 70, as you can see in this picture, they sleep there. So there is a place adverbial over here. She will go there right now. Now for these, we can have a question form: where do they sleep? Or where will she go right now? So here we can, the there is meaningful, but in the above two sentences, there, which is just used as an expletive, this is meaningless, and we do not have the use of there, this use of there in Hindi. Another difference between our source language and target language. Then talking about affirmatives, some more differences. Structure is अपनी बुरी आदतों को तत्काल छोड़ दीजिए. So the structure is OAV, and the English version is give up your bad habits at once. Adverbial comes at the end. So the difference between affirmative and this, between Hindi and English. And then we have the negatives. Fool न तोड़े, object plus verb. Don't pluck flowers. We have verb plus object. The order gets reversed. कृपया शोर न करें. Object plus verb. Please don't make a noise. Make a noise. Verb plus object. Again, we have the reversal of the structure. अपना समय व्यर्थ न करें. Object plus verb. Don't waste your time. Verb plus object. Emphatic sentences which lays stress. That is. कल टैक्सी अवश्य बुलाइए. So कल is an adverbial, object is taxi, and बुलाइए is verb. Do call a taxi tomorrow. We have VOA, the order AO, against the order AOV, we have VOA, we have adverbial at the end. कृपया पंखा अवश्य चला दे. Object plus verb we have. Then please do switch on the fan. We have verb plus object. Difference between source language and target language. Then finally coming to exclamatives, what a place it is, क्या जगह है. what a place it is, क्या जगह है, it is not there in our source language. And वह कितना मधुर गाती है, how sweetly she sings. So the structure of in Hindi is subject plus adverbial plus verb. And the structure in English, as you can see in this picture, is adverbial plus subject plus verb. Another case of exclamatory sentence, a delight. अरे हमने मैच जीत लिया है. Hurrah, we have won the match. Again, SOV, this we have already talked about, the structure SOV, subject, object, verb in Hindi, and subject, verb, object in English. Again, exclamatory sentence expressing pain. इसके इकलौते पुत्र की मृत्यु हो गई. Hi, इसके इकलौते पुत्र की मृत्यु हो गई. Alas, her only son has died. So, इकलौते पुत्र, again we have here a subject plus verb, and in Hindi also we have उसके subject plus verb in this case. Now, of course, similarities and differences both are there, that's what we have been talking in this lecture. Now, more examples about passive simple present. गांधी जी को आज भी याद किया जाता है. गांधी जी is remembered even today. यातायात नियमों का अवश्य पालन किया जाना चाहिए. ट्रैफिक रूल्स मस्ट बी ऑब्जर्व्ड. माता पिता की सेवा की जानी चाहिए. पेरेंट्स ऑट टू बी सर्व्ड. More cases of passive modal and passive modal मार्गदर्शन किया जा सकता है. The guidance could have been given. Blood will be donated here. यहाँ रक्त का दान किया जाएगा. There is of course a difference in the structures. The translations are there, but the structures are different. As we have seen, there are also similarities, but there are also differences. And if a translator is aware of these similarities and differences in the source language and the target language, the task of translation, it becomes easier for the translator. Now, as we have seen that how there is a change of structure and how the words change, and there are no one-to-one equivalents between two languages. So also we here in this picture are examples where a noun changes to verb or an adjective to adverb. So every concert they gave was a sellout. Here, as you can see in picture, every concert they gave was a sellout. Sellout is a noun. Now this changes to इसके हर संगीत कार्यक्रम के सभी टिकट बिक गए. So this is a verb. So this is what happens in translation when we don't have one-to-one, we don't have equivalents. We need to convert from noun to verb. There is also the case of rank shifting, although it's not part of this lecture. But rank shifting is, of course, when we don't have a word. So we have to explain that word with the help of a phrase or a clause or maybe 2 to 3 lines. So there is a rank shifting from the word in the source language. What we get is a clause or a sentence or maybe 2 sentences in the target language. So this is also what the change takes place while translation. Another example that you see, adjective to adverb. The children watched wide-eyed amazement. Wide-eyed here is adjective modifying the noun amazement. Then बच्चे आश्चर्य से आंखें फाड़े देख रहे थे. कैसे देख रहे थे? आंखें फाड़े, that is an adverb. Now another example, adjective to verb. He was in bad mood at breakfast and wasn't very communicative. So the translation is नाश्ते के समय वह खराब मूड में था और बातचीत नहीं कर रहा था. Then again we have preposition to adverb. It gets cooler toward evening. Toward here is a preposition before the noun evening. Now शाम होते होते ठंडक बढ़ जाती है. Preposition to adverb. शाम होते होते is an adverb. Of course, there are other idiomatic changes. Of course, when we try to translate idioms and phrases, idioms and proverbs and metaphors, we need to catch the meaning. Because we have already said in this lecture, there is no one-to-one correspondence between our source language and target language, and there are difficulties in translating from source language to target language, and we have to make efforts in translating. We have to make a lot of efforts. A translator needs to make a lot of efforts to be original and to be authentic and to be meaningful. That is, he should not change the meaning, the original meaning which was there in the source language, and while translating into target language. So this is what a translator needs to take care of. So we have talked about the definition of translation. We have talked about why translation is important. We have talked about what are the methods of translation, and the differences between the source language and target language, and the points that the translator needs to keep in mind while translating. So all this we have done, and we have completed translation. Thank you very much.